Welcome back to PPC Office Hours. My name is Michelle Kop from Level 28 Media.
And my name is Stu Atkins from Atkins Marketing Solutions, coming to you live from the live internet.
Awesome. And in today's video, or podcast, I should say, video podcast, we are going to be doing a deep dive into PPC versus SEO, which is the battle of the century. We're going to talk about all about the difference between, both, search practices, which one's better for your lead generation business, talk about some myths, and leave you here with some tips that we've learned along the way. So let's go ahead and dive in. Are you ready, Stu?
I'm ready, and I got to do my Battle of the Century dance because they're actually complement each other. You know, wax on, wax off, Karate Kid. We're going to call this the PPC SEO Karate Kid episode.
Awesome. Okay, let's get going. So let's.
You can't edit that out. You got to keep that in.
Okay, I'll keep it in, I promise. Okay, so for the listeners here that already are very educated on, they know what PPC is, let's take a few steps back and talk about SEO. Stu, in the simplest way that you can explain it, what is SEO, or search engine optimization?
Well, SEO is essentially the organic free search side of the internet, and how you get traffic, quality traffic and volume specific relevant traffic to a website from an organic standpoint. You're not paying for it, but you like with PPC, but you want to make sure you're getting as much traffic to your website as possible that's relevant, that's specific, as I just mentioned. And you don't want extraneous traffic. You don't want traffic if you're selling basketball, tennis shoes, you don't want traffic for people that are into hiking, are into hang gliding, or et cetera, et cetera. You want to make sure the traffic that's being generated to your website is specific to what your business does. And that way, you're maximizing the quality and the quantity of the traffic. And you want to get as much traffic as possible that's relevant to your website. A lot of that's involved with that is having a proper setup for your website, as far as making sure the content, the meta tags, the page descriptions, etc., everything is set up properly to allow you to grab as much organic traffic as possible. And it's not easy. There are millions of websites out there. The competition is severe, and there's only X amount of space available, even with the continuous scroll that Google enabled a while back. It's very competitive. So, and as I just mentioned, it's not easy. So SEO is bottom line is you want to generate as much free traffic as you can that's relevant to what you're doing on your website from a volume and a quality standpoint.
Yeah. So really, to break things down, when you say organic, I also want to make sure listeners understand organic just means essentially it's free traffic, right? So within search engine marketing, there's, SEM, there's pay-per-click, which is what we always talk about. And that's paying to play so that you appear in the search results. SEO is part of search engine marketing, but you're not necessarily paying to appear at the top to Google. You might be paying an agency or a freelancer to do the back end work in order to get, the results on the organic side. But every click on your website from SEO, you don't have to pay for. But pay-per-click, because it's pay-per-click, you have to pay to even show up. So that's the most simplest way to explain it.
One other thing too that I forgot to mention, Michelle, maybe you're going to say this, but if think of the Google search engine results page, there's essentially three elements to it. At the top, you've got the paid or sponsored ads. In the middle, you have organic. And then at the quote unquote bottom, it used to be the literal bottom. Now it's more of the, continuous scroll bottom.
There's not really a bottom anymore.
It's not a bottom anymore. It's a bottomless pit of
Yeah.
scrolling. So
Yeah.
you have the paid ads. There's roughly on a desktop, you've got 4 at the top, quote unquote 3 at the bottom. Mobile, you've got basically only 3 at the top, and then you have organic in the middle.
Yeah.
So Google tends to, in a sense, kind of prioritize paid to a degree, because if you're paying for it, you get what you pay for. So you get on the top if you pay properly, and a lot of other things are set up with properly on paid search, which we'll talk about. But so you have kind of 2 layers. You've got the paid, sponsored, and then you have organic in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. And Google definitely does prioritize the paid, because that's how they make their money at the end of the day. What was it, like 98% of Google's revenue comes from paid advertising anyway? So they need to make their shareholders happy. How do they do that? Allow advertisers to run ads on their platform. And we've talked about how competitive it is in PPC. It's also very, very competitive with SEO. So one thing that I wanted to really break down is, what are the big differences, Stu, between SEO and PPC?
The number one thing is paid versus free.
Yeah.
With PPC, you have to pay to play. So as we've talked about in the past, paid search is an auction. So you pay based on the keywords, based on the competition. Yeah. And the bidding, it's an auction, it's a bid. And if the account's set up professionally and properly, and you have a strong budget, which is critical, you have a very good chance of consistently showing up at the top of the page on desktop and the top of the page on mobile. So you're paying for what you get with paid search, and you have some control that I'll talk about in a little bit that you don't have on organic. And then from the organic side, as we've alluded to, the content is really important. And if you don't have quality content, and if your website is not set up properly from a basic structural standpoint organically, you're not going to show up. And all the time I have people say, well, if I search for my company name and I hit enter, I show up on the first page of Google. Well, technically that really doesn't matter, because it's the non-brand, brand agnostic searches that are so important to show up for SEO. And I know you'll agree with me, Michelle, it's impossible to show up for all your leading keywords on organic. Absolutely impossible. No way that's going to happen. So it's this balance between the keyword battle of the century that we talked about versus the battle of having to pay for your advertising, which really not a battle. It has many benefits. That's why people utilize paid search. So it's that balance between the free organic and pay-per-click. And in principle, they're very similar in that it's based off the search engine results page for the most part. And that algorithm is looking for people that are searching, and it's indexing it. And your website is getting crawled consistently by Google. If it's not set up properly, if it doesn't have fresh, relevant, specific content that's updated on a regular basis, I always like to say Google's like an ant. An ant lives for one thing, and that's food. If you don't have fresh, relevant content on your website, Google's not going to show up, and you're not going to get Google's attention from an organic standpoint. So again, it's the balance of those two things.
Yeah, another thing I want to add here is that with and it might come off that, we biased because we are PPC professionals, but we're trying to make this as unbiased as possible so
Yeah.
that you guys understand that it is actually very impactful to have both. And we're going to talk about which one is going to be, which one's the winner at the very end. But really, at the end of the day, with pay-per-click advertising, you see results quicker, because you're paying to play. What I've said again on this channel, and in previous podcast episodes, is pay per
Yeah.
clicks kind of like cutting the line at Disneyland. You're paying so that you can cut the line and you don't have to wait as long. Versus SEO is you have to start at the back of the line. SEO takes a really, really long time. If you don't have a strong foundation, there's a lot of on page and off page SEO tactics that you have to put in place in order to even start ranking. And it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time. So think about it like gardening. You got to plant the seeds, you got to water it, you got to nurture it, you got to wait for the sun to, give it its nutrients so that it could bloom into a beautiful garden. But that's not something that happens overnight. So, with pay per click, it's a lot quicker. With pay per click, in terms of the messaging, you can control the messaging better than what's, with SEO. I don't know, Stu, if you wanted to touch on that, but I think that that's really important because with pay per click, you can control the messaging in your headlines and your descriptions and test different messaging. SEO, you can do it to a certain extent, but testing the messaging is a lot more challenging. Do you want to touch on that, Stu?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I was going to mention that it's it's a question that fits into all that is what people see. Often, you and I, for our clients, will set up brand, non-brand, and competitive campaigns. And people say, "Well, why even bother with advertising with a brand campaign?"
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee Google's going to use the title tag for organic for your brand to show up on an SEO based search. They're not using the title tag as much as they used to in the past. So we're tending to see that. And also, you want to make sure that from a mobile standpoint, organic tends to not be as pervasive and as it tends not to show up as much as it used to in the past. Sometimes that will fluctuate. Uh, you, you can take control of the search engine's results page with pay per click. There's no guarantee that you can control the search engine results page results with organic because, as we just mentioned, it is impossible to show up for all your leading keywords. So if
Mhm.
this is being done properly, you work in conjunction with a good SEO strategy or agency, and what keywords do you want to show up for organic? What is not showing up? You can shift that over to PPC and vice versa.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, you can control the messaging, especially with the advertising. If with two things, with your keywords and with your ads. So if your ad copy is set up properly, you can really take control of the advertising messaging, and you can keep an eye on that. And you have not only the art and science. We've done ads long enough where we can actually set up great ad copy. But then there's the Google machine learning algorithm with responsive search ads that give you 44,000 plus variations on the responsive search ads. And so you by tweaking and updating ads on a regular basis, you can improve the messaging. You can try to get it as good as you can. Then you've got the human element, you've got the machine learning part of it, and you really can control the messaging on a dime. And you can change that once a day, once a week,
Yeah.
once a month. I mean, you can really, from a
It's
rapid
pretty quick.
response
Yeah.
standpoint, you can control the messaging. Not in a control freak kind of messaging, but
You
in
don't
a
want
type
that.
of messaging that can help both organically and from a paid search standpoint.
Yeah.
But uh, and it's gonna and believe it or not, it's going to improve organic results over time also, because if you've got more people coming to the site based on paid search, you go into Google Analytics for over time, and what you look at is a critical benchmark, and that's engagement rate. And what I like to do, I like to compare PPC engagement rate with organic and direct traffic engagement rate on Google Analytics 4. I have some clients that pay-per-click has a higher engagement rate than organic and direct. Now, that's not always the case. It depends on the quality of the SEO on the website and a lot of different factors, how it ranks, how long it's been around, how well the website is set up. But that looking at engagement rate, which used to be the bounce rate and is now engagement rate, and that measures a combination of conversions. Do they go to multiple websites? There's kind of a multi-layered algorithm that Google uses to establish engagement rate. So it's really important that you go into Google Analytics 4, you click on reports, and you bring up the various user engagement benchmarks with all the traffic. And then you compare PPC to organic and direct and referred traffic. And as I said, PPC doesn't always beat organic, but it really gives you, and sometimes PPC may have a lower engagement rate than organic, but you're still getting a fantastic amount of leads. However, that engagement rate is really important to look at, and it kind of proves the case that no matter where the traffic's coming from, you want to look at that, and it'll give you the balance of organic and paid search. And also, back to the brand issue, brand terms are cheap. They're inexpensive. So you can, they're very low cost per click for the most part. So you can almost guarantee that your brand is getting on page one of Google in times when it may not be organically with paid search, and it doesn't cost you that much. And it also is going to boost your account level quality score when you're running brand paid search ads also. So those are just a couple of quick thoughts there, but that Google Analytics 4 is real. I mean, the Google Analytics 4 is not perfect. Has been some issues with it. However, it is something to look at. You don't want to ignore it when you compare paid search and organic.
Yeah, I think it's really important, even when you're running PPC campaigns, to not operate in a silo and also look at how organic and other channels are performing so that you can see and benchmark yourself versus, other channels. And then from there, you can make, better decisions based off of, what you're seeing. So really, what we're trying to drive home here is that it's really important to have a combination of both. I think having a two-pronged approach using SEO and PPC is really critical. And when it comes down to the battle of the century between the two, it's not really, we can't really say that one is necessarily better than the other. It's really just about testing and having a combination of both, and then seeing maybe having an approach where PPC has coverage where SEO doesn't, and that's probably going to be your best approach, because you don't need to go after every single type of keyword on PPC if you're already ranking really well for SEO. Or if you just want full coverage, you can just go after everything in PPC while you're working on your SEO strategy. So that's really the key importance here. When you're trying to decide which to use. Ideally, it would be great to have both. If you're on a budget, like a real big budget, you're just starting out, maybe SEO is probably a better approach, just because you don't have a budget in general. And then from there, work on doing a DIY approach until you have enough budget to be investing into PPC. But if you've already got a pretty big, advertising budget, and you've got or sufficient advertising budget and resources to do PPC, just go all in both.
Yeah, I fully agree. And so I guess what we're trying to say is PPC and SEO complement each other.
They do.
They don't battle. They don't fight each other. It's not like they're on the wrestling mat trying to see who can pin who. And I think that's a misconception that is frequently out there. Sometimes I'll have a potential client come to me and say, okay, I want to do paid search. And I do the research and I realize, okay, you may need a $5,000 to $10,000 at least monthly budget, maybe even more.
Yeah, to make
They
a
say,
dent.
well, right now I don't have the budget. I'll say, okay, well, what you can do in the interim, and don't see this as a substitute for paid search, but sometimes and often an initial opening monthly charge, management charge with a good SEO agency is going to be less than that. And good SEO companies usually start at a minimum to $500 to $1,000 a month for their services.
For local businesses, yeah,
for local businesses. So often that's a good start to get things rolling. If you don't have a budget for PPC, but ideally, and both Michelle and I know over time that running both at the same time, my most successful clients pay money for good SEO and pay money for great advertising, both the management and the advertising budget. If you have that double barrel approach, you're going to hit the targets more often, and it's much more effective if you can do that. A couple other quick tips on the organic, some free tips on organic. Make sure you're blogging. You need to have you should be blogging, if at all possible, at least 1 to 4 times a month. And you want to make sure the blog posts are ideally at least 1,000 to 2,000 words. It used to be you could get by with short blog posts.
No AI either.
Yeah, no AI. And what I do sometimes, I'll write a blog post. I might have AI edit it for clarity and just for clarity, and that can work well. But if everybody's writing blog posts on AI, Google's going to pick up on that, faster than a Indianapolis 500 poll winner. So what you also want is correct keyword structure on most pages organically. You want your page load speed at least 5 seconds or less. Ideally, 2 to 3 seconds is much better. You want your domain registered for 5 years or more, mobile friendly site. And there must be 250 plus variables that Google uses to rank organic websites. If you're not a writer, if you don't like to blog, pay someone to do it. You've got to get regular, fresh, updated content, and there's just no substitute for that. It shows your thought leadership, and it will set you apart from other businesses because it gives you the opportunity to showcase what you know and your knowledge. So the content is just it's so important and it's so critical. I can't substitute it. I once got a 6-figure client from one blog post.
Oh, really?
And that blog post, believe it or not, was on toilet seats. And I wrote this blog post about toilet seats because one of the toilet seats failed at our house. So I went to Home Depot. My wife sent me to Home Depot.
How does a toilet seat fail? It broke?
It broke because there's all different kinds of toilet seats. There's $5 toilet seats or $500 toilet seats. There's toilet seats that will wash you, that will play music. There's stainless steel toilet. So I wrote this blog post on comparing, a generic product to a premium product. So there's generic toilet seats and there's premium toilet seats. Believe it or not, the CEO of a $10 million toilet seat manufacturing company read that post, and then he kept reading my blog for a year, and then he bought my first book, and then he hired me in 2014, and he was a 6-figure client that year. Blew me away. It put me into total shock, and I realized, wow, content is really important. Now, I don't mean to put a lid on that issue or really flush it out, but it's really important that we talk about toilet seats because, believe it or not, a product that simple can really transform your business. And it was all based on content. And Google, believe it or not, Google has to make money on advertising. But if Google did not have content to index and organize from an organic standpoint, PPC really wouldn't be around, and so the two, uh, it Google has to have organic and PPC. It's
Mhm.
part of its business model. Part of your business model as a small business, big business, whatever size your business is both the combination of organic and paid search. There's really no substitute. And
Yeah.
and if you're smart, you set aside the budget over time to really focus
Yeah.
to focus on both.
Yeah. I think
Sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked on toilet
no,
seats, but I
I
just
think that
remembered to talk about it. It
no, that's a really good story. I completely forgot about it.
People remember that. I tell it all the time.
Yeah. Um, so I also want to touch on a big myth. Like a lot of small businesses think that, yeah, well, SEO doesn't require an investment. Well, it's going to cost you something, whether it's your time to figure it out, which, if you're not an expert in any of this, it's going to take you a really, really long time because it's very, very, very technical. And you're
Yep,
probably not even going to get it right in general, and probably going to need to
that's right.
eventually hire someone. It just doesn't require an ad budget. I think that that's the big thing that I want to clarify. It doesn't require an ad budget, but if you can get someone that knows what they're doing, that knows how to rank and can give you an appropriate not necessarily deadline, but an appropriate expectation on when to expect results, and they meet that and they're able to deliver, then you've got yourself a winning approach there, with your SEO. And then if you've got PPC to complement it, then it's just a winning combination across the board.
Great points. And uh, SEO like PPC, when you're looking for help, there's snake oil out there. You have to be really careful. We often get these emails from people saying, I can get you on the first page of Google with your SEO and your keywords. That's not necessarily the case. You have to be very careful because, like Michelle said, it's like gardening. It takes time. You got to plant, you've got to fertilize, you've got to water, you have to monitor it. So
Yeah.
you want to get references regarding SEO, referrals, and you want to make sure that and check those references. And you want someone that understands that time plus patience plus data applies to both PPC and to SEO. And you got good SEO takes usually a minimum of 6 to 12 months to get ramped up. A minimum.
Yeah, and
So
that's
you just
hard.
have
That's really hard to have patience for that. It's really hard because you go
it
6 to
really
12
is.
months, you're paying, if we're just talking like you're a local business, you're spending at least 500 to 1,000. That's on the minimum. That's probably not even like the best, SEO. This is probably just like, your average agency, charging that amount just to do, some blog posts and whatever, but and do on page and off page, basic SEO. But yeah, like you could go for a really long time without seeing anything, and it can be very concerning because every month can go by and you're like, where's my results? And you don't know if they're
Yeah.
lying to you. Yeah.
And think of the return on investment, though. Think of the return on investment for that toilet seat story. I mean,
Hmm.
at that time, I wasn't running PPC. I wrote that simple blog post, and boom, the ROI on that
Made
one
you
for
six figures.
2014 was huge. Was huge. That was
Yeah.
worth a lot of toilet seats. I could have built some extra bathrooms, in the house for that. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's really important. I fully agree with Michelle, and that's it's a well-rounded approach. That balance is really important in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. So all in all, when it comes down to the battle, when it comes down to, wondering in between SEO and PPC, you gotta have both. You gotta
Yeah.
have both if you really want to succeed and to even, have enough coverage in on the search engine results page on Google. And if you're really serious about your business, it's definitely a two-pronged approach with both channels.
100% agree.
So,
It's so true. And you may
okay.
not always hear it this way. There may be a bias from a SEO agency, there may be a bias from a PPC agency, but Michelle and I always tell this to clients that the two, it's a complement. These two
Mhm.
services are going out on a date together. and they may get married in the future and make your business a lot of money. So they complement each other. They don't. It's not a conflict. It's a complement, and they work extremely well together.
Awesome. Match made in heaven. Okay.
That's right. A match made in heaven. A match made in digital heaven.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, that's pretty much it, Stu, that we have for this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Okay. Thank you.